What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back to America Trends. Larry Rifkin along with John Kropsic. And, we call this one 5G Whizz.
Yeah.
Gee whiz, John.
Gee whiz.
Wow.
Well, this is
Hey, Poindexter.
This is supposed to change everything.
Life as we know it?
Life as we know it.
On this planet?
No more DSL. No more cable, possibly.
Wait, hold on. People don't even understand what you're talking about. DSL.
DSL.
What was DSL that we now don't have to remember because it's going to be obsolete?
Well,
what
that's
is it?
the phone company. That's the phone companies.
Oh, okay. Is there a phone
internet
company
connection.
anymore?
Yeah, I think there is.
Ma Bell.
Of
Where
course,
did
the
Ma
cable
Bell
company's
go?
got their cable. But now we're going to have 5G, and this is the game changer because what they'll do is they'll put mini antennas up all over the place, and you'll be able to get 5G everywhere.
Well, I'm reading that this whole new era of whiz-bang technology, which is, by the way, folks, just in case, so when somebody says to you, what is this 5G? You can say it's the fifth generation of cellular network technology. Okay, so right. Fifth generation. Yeah. Like, all of us look at our, I'm second generation this or third generation in America. So at any rate, so it's going to give us greater broadband access.
Right.
And that means that all kinds of things we imagine are going to be possible. We're going to be more productive, 100 times faster.
But it'll enable the use of driverless cars because they'll be, they'll have internet will be everywhere. So.
Okay, so if you're going from one city to another, because America is very provincial, and you're in a driverless car in, let's say, Minneapolis or Chicago, I'm reading, they're adopting to this much quicker. But then you go to Des Moines, and they don't have it.
Yeah,
Are you in trouble?
It. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You can only use it. You'll only be able to use it in the cities that have the system. I think the 5G is only going to be in probably the big cities to start with, and then it'll start to spread from there.
Yeah, but I'm reading. I mean, I've got all these ads here, John, from Verizon and Sprint and everybody. We're number one. We're moving faster than anybody else.
I mean, a lot of them are still operating under the 4G LTE system, which is
pretty good.
Which is pretty darn good, but it's not. The 5G system around here hasn't really been implemented yet.
So we don't see yet the benefit of this. We will soon.
We will.
And John, they're talking about 100 times faster. Now, look, when I go up on the internet and something pops up like this, 100 times faster.
I know.
What does that
mean?
mean?
You got the fastest internet.
Well, John always, he's got internet envy. But tell me, seriously, John, 100 times faster.
But it will make watching video and streaming, I mean, you'd be able to watch it with no delay. It'll be there and it won't have to buffer or anything. I mean, it's going to change. I don't know for the average user like us if we're going to really realize it, but
for many other applications.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, let's look at it the old ways when we had AOL and everything was buffering forever. Yes. Now, I watch Netflix or whatever, and boom, it all comes on so quickly. But I'm reading all the hype, John, that American farms are going to be more productive, manufacturing more competitive. Of course, we're not the only ones doing this, folks.
Right.
They're doing it in China, South Korea, everywhere else. Remote access to healthcare, surgeries are going to be able to be done
they'll
remote.
Be able to do robotic surgery remotely, which is kind of scary to think about.
And you can do your own surgery, right? Isn't that what they're telling us?
Well, I don't know about that. But,
okay. And your kids are going to brush their teeth every day as a result.
Yeah, that's right. You can brush their teeth from
anywhere.
Alaska.
Now, there are some concerns, folks, about this 5G and all the waves and the ultra high frequencies. And then there are always, as there has been in the past, the NIMBY issue. So not in my backyard, because
Right.
John, you talked about it. As much as these are going to be smaller towers to get this signal to us,
There's gonna
I'm
be
reading
more of them.
Yeah, 300,000 have to be
And they're going to
sighted.
be lower. There's a lot of, and I'm even concerned health-wise what it's going to do to us, because you're going to have many antennas. They're going to be much closer to us, proximity, and already we got cell phones next to us all the time. I don't know. And this is the part that I wonder about health of us and other animals around.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Roslyn Layton is with us from the American Enterprise Institute, and we threw a whole lot of questions at her because we really want to know, and we want you to know what's going on with this 5G technology. You're seeing it, you're hearing about it, but it's up in the air, literally, and it's going to be coming down to a telephone and a computer near you very, very soon. So what are the implications? So if you haven't really stopped to think about it, this next 30 minutes is going to be really important, because I think 5G, according to all those who know, is going to really be life-changing. So let's get to it now on America Trends. With us on the line is Roslyn Layton, and she's with the American Enterprise Institute, and we're talking technology today. We're talking about 5G. And I know there are a lot of people who might have read an article here, there, or maybe skipped over an article, Roslyn, saying, I'll never understand what this is. But why don't you help us to understand 5G technology? Is it all that? Because what I'm reading screams from the headlines that it's going to be remarkable in terms of what it will allow Americans to do.
Absolutely. Well, maybe the best way to describe it is, if people have heard of 4G with their mobile phones or their smartphones, 5G is 100 to 1,000 times faster than 4G. And that's sort of like getting a fiber-fast speed through the air instead of through the ground. And what is so exciting about 5G, it's not just the ability to do, it's not just about smartphones, it's trying to bring this seamless connectivity to all of industry. So it's not just the apps, but it means that all the industries and technical applications having connectivity. To put it in big perspective, if you look at the American economy today, only, the digital industries, which make up about 30% of our economy, they're very efficient. But it's the other 70% of our economy, which we still have to improve. We have efficiencies that we can bring out in manufacturing, in healthcare, in transportation, in other industries like that. And that's what 5G is about, helping the industries themselves, not just consumers, take advantage of getting online.
Well, perhaps, and I think you were really leading us in the right direction, in a sense, backward. Because if we go back and we remind people that 4G added what is about $100 billion annually to the American output and created millions of wireless-related jobs, I mean, people probably can't even imagine their lives before the smartphone, but the smartphone was really facilitated by 4G.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I wanted to take you back even a step further.
Sure.
Those of us who remember the beginning of the Internet, we used to do dial-up. You had used your telephone line to get onto the Internet. Then maybe you used a cable connection that was 3 or 6 megabits per second, for example. Then, or perhaps you had those speeds have gotten faster. Then some people have said, well, I'm just going to use a mobile connection with their smartphone. Well, now we're going to skip yet again. And so instead of getting cable through the ground or a fiber through the ground watching a big smart TV, you'll get that connection through the air. And that is really exciting from the perspective of competition, of cost, of being able to, substitute a new source of broadband. So that's just for the everyday person could experience. But what's really exciting about 5G is to do things like remote surgery, self-driving cars, smart cities technologies, smart grid technologies. For example, bringing connectivity to an oil field or a coal mine or a large farm in the middle of nowhere with thousands of acres. So that's the kind of connectivity that we're talking about, being able to get tons and tons of data instantaneously and having seamless connectivity.
Now, the fourth generation of 4G, I'm going to stay at 4G for just a moment. And now that rolled out over many years, and today we've got 4G LTE. And that delivers speeds that begin, I am reading, to approach some of the expectations for the early onset of 5G. So if you have LTE, how comparable is what you're experiencing today to what we may see for everyone to have going forward?
LTE means long-term evolution. So you're right, the proper term is 4G/LTE. So what that means is that, when you are, on your smartphone, you can be able to download films. It might take a few seconds, but if you did the same thing with 5G, it would be instantaneous. You'd have a whole library of movies available to you. But for the consumer, what it would really mean is canceling your cable subscription and getting everything that you get through cable through the air. So there would be no need to have the wire to your home. So for many people who would like to have more competition, that's exactly what's going on today. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And as we go along here, I mean, this will destroy certain businesses, but it will build so many others. And as you say, the applications are going to be remarkable. We've heard about these driverless cars, but would you say that without the sensor capability of 5G, they're not necessarily going to be as safe in our thinking as they will be as a result?
So this is also a good point, is that this is really an evolution, not like a light switch. It's not like, all right, one day it's all done and everything's different. It's evolving over time. And the other thing with regard to, let's say if you're switching between cable and wireless, what happens when a new technology will come on the scene, the other technologies may fall in price. So there will be price competition between different kinds of technology in an effort to win the customer. But when we talk about something like self-driving cars, there's also, in order to realize the 5G, there are new networks that have to be installed. So 4G was really largely facilitated by mobile towers or masts on top of buildings. If you go around your community, you'll probably see what looks like an antenna or a mast on a building. Well, the 5G infrastructure is actually what's called a small cell. It might be the size of a pizza box or a shoe box, and it can be attached to a light pole, to a street pole, on buildings and so on. It could be camouflaged with a tree, for example. So instead of having these large, distinct towers or antennas, you have small cells which are integrated within the city. And it's through these multiple cells that we enable this new connectivity. And that's part of the important thing with self-driving cars, is that you can't have a situation where the signals are not instantaneous. The connectivity has to be instant and seamless in order for it to work. If you were buffering, the car is driving itself and it needs to know that it's going to hit another car, it wouldn't work. You have to make sure that the connections are instantaneous, and that's why part of this will be some cities will experience it sooner than others, because some places are more welcoming to get new networks in place more than others.
Well,
so,
I want to talk about that because the NIMBY syndrome seems to rear its head in any of these evolutions. And so let's talk about that, because the cell tower sightings that you're talking about for 5G, they can't travel as far, the frequency waves. And so there are hundreds of thousands of more cell sites that will be needed. They may be smaller packages, but this means 100 times more antenna locations. And there are cities, I'm reading, that are starting to try to extract certain fees already, and so they're getting into the game. I mean, how difficult is this in a country like America, where there's so many different jurisdictions, and we don't have a national government that just says do this? So how complicated is this going to be?
Well, I will tell you, we do have a national government that does try to fast-track the rollout of infrastructure. It is a policy of the United States going back to 1996 to fast-track the rollout of competitive broadband infrastructure, to get it there, to keep the cost low, to make it efficient. And that was very important for the U.S. to deliver 4G networks, which as you pointed out, created billions of, $100 billion of revenue, many, many jobs. So in order to do the same thing for 5G, the Federal Communications Commission, which is the agency that regulates communications, they have issued a set of guidelines to encourage communities about what they can do to get networks quickly. Half of the U.S. states have adopted a model code, meaning they have a framework in place so that if your community, wherever you are, Connecticut or wherever the case may be, can deploy these networks quickly and at a minimum cost so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And that's very important why we see, certain cities like Sacramento or Indianapolis, San Antonio, they are, already off and running. And, a few dozen cities in the U.S. have already started building their networks. In other cases, there is definitely parochialism where some cities say, well, gee, we should, we happen to own these street poles and we're going to charge you $5,000 for every street pole. Well, in that case, it won't scale. You can't build a network if it's going to be that expensive. So those companies will just choose not to deploy there, and that's very unfortunate. My hope is that we'll look to we'll be inspired by those cities that are leading the way, and that those other places that are laggards, will realize it's not the way to go. Because the cities have a benefit too, to be able to give their residents better broadband offerings, to enable new industries to begin, to improve their city management. There are a number of benefits. Public safety is a big reason to do it. It helps law enforcement in some cases. So, this is always the thing. Anytime there's a new technology, there's always an interest for someone to say, well, please line my pockets so, you can deploy here. But if you want to have competition, have multiple providers, 5G does allow that, because the cells, if you on any one street pole, you can put multiple cells, so that it doesn't have to be just one company providing. 2 or 3 could be able to offer this. And right now, you have all 4 mobile carriers wanting to deliver 5G.
I just want to make sure that I understand the Trump administration has considered building this single nationalized 5G network. And yet some metropolitan areas are, as you say, ahead of the game. Some are behind. Some are trying to get the drop on some of these companies with their own fees and assessments. So where are we with this? I mean, what is the federal policy, and how much is it coming down from the federal government to communities as to what they need to do to help this 5G revolution come along?
The 4 companies, the leading 4 mobile carriers, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and T-Mobile, they have pledged to invest several $100 billion in the next 4 to 5 years to deliver 5G. So the idea that we should take taxpayers' money to build a network is not a good idea. That would not be, especially when you have so many private companies who are wanting to invest private money. And by the way, it's not just the mobile wireless carriers who want to deliver networks. It's the satellite industry. They also want to get into this game. The cable companies are also looking at ways to leverage their investments in the ground with Wi-Fi networks above the ground. You actually have so much money from the industry being willing to be invested to realize the next generation of connectivity. It doesn't make sense to have taxpayer money to do this.
But is that what the Trump administration, is that what they were suggesting?
The official view of the Trump administration is to support, and if you can look at Larry Kudlow, who's the economic leader he's within the White House Economic Council, he is a pro-5G, leading with the private sector. So this idea about the national 5G network, that is some people in the Defense Department who would like to have this as a side project. It is not. It has not been supported by the Federal Communications Commission, which is an independent agency. So it's not really it's kind of a sideshow, if you will, because where the money is being driven by the private sector.
But the White House, they held a summit on this. And what were the carrots and the sticks that they offered the industry? And how much is the pace of this 5G development dependent upon federal rulemaking and to allow them to do what it is that they need to do?
So the White House Summit, that was a very exciting day. It had, leaders from the different agencies, which would be the FCC, the NTIA, different offices in the White House, and it was primarily the industry leaders. As I said, the The National 5G Network, that is a side project by some people in the Defense Department. It doesn't, as far as I know, have any money associated with it. Maybe there are some investors, but I just don't see it. I just don't see it happening, because when you have hundreds of billions of dollars where the spectrum is being purchased by private companies, there's no spectrum being allocated to this particular 5G program. So
really?
I suspect, there's a small group that's trying to push it. I don't expect it to go anywhere. They have hired some people to try to. These are the backers of that program, but it's like a minuscule compared to where the real energy is going.
But I want to go back to the Obama FCC. And that made the U.S. the first nation in the world to set aside high-band millimeter wave spectrum for these 5G applications. So they had a role at that time, the Obama administration, in looking forward. So I'm wondering what it is that the federal government can best do today to facilitate all that we expect from 5G. What's the best thing they can do?
Things that have to happen, they've actually been, I know the Obama administration did some things. I wish they could have done more. But the important thing is to make the auctions possible. It takes a couple of years to get the auction, the spectrum, before it becomes available. So that process takes a long time. But the FCC now, under the Trump administration, has issued a code, if you will, a 5G code to maximize the rollout. And that is, as I said, is going on in about half of the states. The other half of the states, I'm sorry to say it, there is a red and a blue split. So red states, for the most part, are trying to fast-track the infrastructure. Blue states are suing the government, saying that the FCC should not be issuing such a code, that they should be able to charge whatever kind of fees that they want for the city monopoly. They own the street poles. They should charge whatever they want. But the reason we have a regulator is to regulate the access, the capabilities to establish the networks in the first place. So unfortunately, there are lawsuits against the administration along a lot of fronts, just as a way to oppose the agenda, even if it's in the interest of all Americans, to maximize the network. I expect that lawsuit will be lost, because we have very clearly stated in our legislation and in the prior rollout of 4G and 3G and all the other networks, mobile networks, that the FCC is allowed to set the guidelines and set the national policy. Some flexibility is allowed for the communities, but they can't be discriminatory in the way that if you say the maximum rental fee is $100, you can't charge $10,000, for example, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of dispute that's going on presently. But again, the proof is in the pudding. We're already seeing some cities who are enjoying these things, that people are able to switch away from the cable if they want, switching to 5G. The precision agriculture is going on in Mississippi, for example. So we're actually seeing the applications of 5G taking place. And I think when cities see that they're being left behind because they want to extract revenue from the rollout of networks, that they will change their minds that that's the right strategy.
Speed versus ultimate sophistication and utilization. I want to go back to 4G. And when you look at it, 3/4 of the global app economy is American. And yet some say that, for example, with LTE, the 4G LTE, that Sweden got the jump on us in terms of the latest iteration of 4G. How important is it for America to be first in this 5G race versus the best and the most utility to what it is we build?
I think it's something that we should keep in mind when we hear about cities that, aren't serious about deploying next generation networks. The issue today is China. China has already eclipsed the U.S. app market 3 years ago. They have more revenue and downloads to Chinese apps than American apps. And that's a concern for our internet ecosystem, because China is also delivering its equipment to the rest of the world. Equipment maker Huawei, they're making more equipment that goes into these networks. They make it cheaper. They make the phones. They're making the apps. So, this is also, I would say, I regret that during the Obama administration, we got our eyes off the ball. I mean, the FCC at the time wanted to regulate the internet, and instead of looking at how do we ensure that American industry is first. Now, we have an opportunity here with 5G to close the gap, and But, our big players like our Cisco is not the world leader anymore. It's been surpassed. The Google, Facebooks, and Amazons, they're being challenged by the Chinese versions of those things. So this is another part where if we really want to see American leadership in the technology, we've got to come together. We have to get our act together and understand that it's not the United States is not the only player. I mean, there are China is wanting to dominate these things globally, and they've been on a path for some years now to do that.
Roslyn Layton is with us from the American Enterprise Institute, and we're talking about 5G technology, and you're learning a whole lot about it on this podcast. John Krosick has a question for you.
Yeah, just a quick question. I thought I read toward the end of the Obama administration that they had opened up some bandwidth and given AT&T the jump for emergency in all cities to connect fire and police departments. Did you hear anything about that?
So the FirstNet, this was an open process to companies that wanted to bid on spectrum to deliver a public safety network. So that was open to any comers, and AT&T won that particular bid. So if you hear about what's called FirstNet, that's a national standard for public safety network, and that happened some years ago, and it's in place, and it's up and running today.
So is that a 5G network that they built, AT&T?
No, it is not
Okay.
It will be. It's evolving in that direction, but it has a 4G capability present. It's using a specific set of spectrum. There's specific applications for it, and that network is, how would you say, calibrated or managed to deliver only public safety functions. So it's not a consumer network. You don't connect to that to get Netflix, for example. It's only for public safety capabilities, and it's managed for that reason. It has special security capabilities. For example, no Chinese equipment is allowed to be used in that network for public safety reasons and national security reasons. So it's quite a fast and very capable, serviceable network.
But I think AT&T and Sprint, Verizon, and T-Mobile were upset because it kind of gave them a jump on a piece of spectrum that they haven't been able to get a hold of.
I'm not privy to all the ins and outs of that, but that went on for some time. All those companies had the ability to bid for it. There were many, many requirements that the government wanted to do that. So they and AT&T happened to fulfill the requirements. Now, it is a fact that the other networks, they offer subscriptions to public safety organizations. So you don't have to, if you are a police department, you don't have to use FirstNet if you don't want to. Okay, you can use other networks, but that was the case that was what that administration wanted to do at that time.
Let me ask you, as we go back, and you referenced the Obama administration, Tom Wheeler, the former FCC chairman, says that this 5G technology must benefit everyone beyond the urban and suburban core, and that will take some government intervention. He also says that we should be less concerned about beating China to 5G and more concerned about a 5G system that works for all Americans. So there's this concern about the disparity between those who can afford 5G and those who will be locked out of it at the outset. What do you say to that?
As I've mentioned before, I mean, it's up for grabs. If people in rural areas want to have, they want to start with 5G, they can make themselves available to do so. I mean, where we have 5G applications being started right now with Mississippi with precision agriculture. So, in fact, it may be in the rural areas where we'll see the first industrial applications, because those communities are saying to the networks, please come here. We're going to work with you. We're bringing our entrepreneurs, our particular sectors. I mean, ironically, where this is not being deployed is Silicon Valley, because those communities have been the most difficult to work with. It's very difficult to get the permissions to deploy the networks. So I actually think you will see some of the first activities in rural areas, and making that available for people who don't have broadband at all. And in fact, even T-Mobile Sprint, as part of their merger, they have made a plan to try to deliver in rural areas. Just mention one other thing, is that the other benefit here is because the technological spectrum has been able to recover. So, for example, spectrum that we thought couldn't be used for mobile communications has now been, been able to repurpose that through better technology, so that for example, the spectrum that will go long distance, you can use that now in rural areas where we didn't have the technology before. So the capability of the software and hardware to do the signal processing, to transmit the signals, that's improved very much from 5 or 10 years ago.
When we look at all the companies involved in this, Sprint and T-Mobile saying they need really for scale to come together, and 5G is a really important reason for that for them. Verizon, AT&T, Samsung. I mean, who's leading the charge? If the private sector is really going to have such a role in this, where do you see who's got the best game plan, if you will?
What I'd say is there are multiple game plans in play, and we don't know which one is the best. And that is actually a very exciting thing that's going on. We have different companies placing different bets on different strategies. So Verizon, for example, they wanted to get into the advertising space where they purchased Yahoo, and they thought they could also deliver that, and as well as looking at going after the home broadband market, for example, replacing cable. So they have had one strategy. AT&T has another different strategy where they purchased Time Warner, and they also have a satellite company. They're looking at how they deliver broadband. Sprint and T-Mobile, yet another strategy. So each one of them have different set of spectrum, different set of deployment strategies, different assets that they're bringing to the table, and we don't know which one yet will win. And if anything, I think it's most exciting because we have the private sector is going to try to find the best way to get you connected to the internet. It will bring down prices, improve the quality, improve the speeds. And, in the last 2 years, the U.S. has come up into the top 10 in internet speeds where we had languished some years before. So this is all very exciting. It's not what you typically read in the press because they don't, they're not going into details about all the strategy and everything that's behind it. But we're in a golden age of, wireless connectivity.
And when will people begin to feel the impact of 5G? And again, it's not a sudden thing. It's something that will evolve. But what should people begin looking for?
Well, I think that where you do see it, you can go into Sacramento, California, for example, and people cutting the cord where they're getting instead of getting cable through the ground, they're getting all their video through the air. And that, I think, is one of the most exciting ways to experience it. I mean, there's some cool videos on Verizon's website showing how that's working. So in maybe 20 or 30 cities where that's kind of the beginning era where people cut the cord for broadband. The other areas I said before are these individual applications like the precision agriculture, remote surgery. There's different places where self-driving cars are, autonomous vehicles are underway. So, little by little, and of course, I hope your viewers will check out American Enterprise Institute, where we're trying to track some of these developments and how it's going.
By the way, I know I've read this about remote surgery, and believe me, during surgery, I'd like the doctor as far away from me as possible, not even touching me. But how does that work? Yeah. How does remote surgery work?
I don't think there's just one particular mode of doing it, but, and by the way, this is not a new idea. I mean, there has been, think about if you lived on Greenland, where this is area the size of Alaska with just a handful of people, and they have been having telemedicine solutions for more than 10 years, where they connected to a hospital in Copenhagen, so that, because when you're in some remote places, there's no calling 911 and the ambulance comes to your door. So the idea with remote surgery is taking advantage of this instantaneous, seamless connectivity. So if you imagine a crystal clear Skype connection where you can see a particular, let's say it's a person's eye, and it's magnified, and you have lasers, and the doctor can do the particular eye surgery, right, over the internet essentially, but with a very high-speed, high definition image and high precision lasers and optics. So that's kind of an example. Think about in other ways with your, let's say on your body, you might have sensors that are measuring your heart rate or your breathing or your different aspects of your body which are kept in a system to see are you at risk for a heart attack? And all these kind of things that, being able to prevent having an emergency, it's a tremendous cost
absolutely.
saver in healthcare.
Absolutely.
And we have these capabilities through our mobile phones. So how about people aging in place, for example? When you are an elderly person, your family is not nearby, how you can have connectivity in your home to improve your experience at home, and helping, the different ways that sensors can be put in the home to help care for a person, for example.
One of the things that comes to mind, and then I will let you go, Roslyn, is the notion that if we're really going to have driverless cars, we better have this across the entire United States, because you don't want to take your driverless car to a place where they really don't have that connectivity.
Right.
So you're going from a very safe city because you've got eyes in the back of your car, eyes in the front of your car, on the side of your car, and then you get to another city where you just don't have those eyes, and you can only imagine what occurs in that case. Well, Roslyn Layton, thank you so much for walking us through the world of 5G. May it come as soon as possible. I think it's going to be very, very exciting. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hey, Larry, I got some exciting news.
Well, let's hear it, John.
We are now part of the MHNR network.
Really? Where can you find the MHNR network?
We can find us at mhnrnetwork.com.
Let's go there right now.
All right.